panic attack or atrial fibrillation? Here's how to tell. People with anxiety or depression are most likely to mistake panic for atrial fibrillation. The aim of treating the most common heart rhythm disorder, called atrial fibrillation, is to relieve symptoms. Your heart may race and you can feel breathless during atrial fibrillation episodes that last for a minute or longer, even indefinitely. But for some people who have anxiety or depression disorders, what they think they feel is not what's actually happening with their heart rhythm, new research shows. The study was reported by clinical investigators at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island and the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and published in Heart Rhythm. Data collected from a heart monitor that each of the 458 patients wore for 1 week, showing actual heart rhythm, was compared to individual responses on questionnaires about symptoms. The results uncovered a major disconnect for 68 of the patients, who either overestimated or underestimated their symptoms. Some individuals had atrial fibrillation less than 10% of the time, according to the heart monitor, yet they said on their questionnaires that they were in near continuous atrial fibrillation, more than 90% of the time. People with a diagnosed anxiety disorder or depression disorder were the most likely to overestimate their heart symptoms, according to the study. One possible explanation, according to lead study author Anil G., MD, FHRS, from Chapel Hill, is that symptoms of this heart condition are vague and nonspecific, like a fluttering feeling in the chest, anxiety, and fatigue. All of these could be due to different causes. But also, Dr. G. says, patients with atrial fibrillation and anxiety misperceive their anxiety as atrial fibrillation symptoms. And an anxiety attack can actually cause the heart to have an atrial fibrillation episode. A positive feedback loop occurs in a cycle, he says. Patients have atrial fibrillation. This heightens their anxiety. Their anxiety increases their atrial fibrillation. Is it a panic attack or tachycardia? Panic attacks and tachycardia, a rapid heart rate, can be difficult to distinguish, says heart rhythm specialist John Day, MD, a cardiologist at Intermountain Healthcare in Murray, Utah. In his experience, for many of his patients who have atrial fibrillation, their heart racing may actually trigger a panic attack. Depression, stress, and anxiety are powerful triggers of atrial fibrillation, Dr. Day says. Sometimes, it can be difficult to determine which came first, the panic or the tachycardia. For these patients, I will have them wear an event monitor, Holter heart monitor, or even use their smartphone with one of the newer electrocardiogram apps, like a LiveCore or ECG check, and record their symptoms at the time, says Day. With a heart monitor we can usually determine if it is really a panic attack or an arrhythmia. He relies on objective documentation of atrial fibrillation, and notes that most patients always have their phone with them, so it is easy for them to quickly do a check of their heart rate with one of the ECG phone apps. What to do when you have a mood disorder and a fib? As a cardiologist, I am not treating anxiety that often, but it's something I have to explain to patients, says GE. He also often uses a heart monitor to tie symptoms a patient feels to their actual heart rate. I explain it's probably not cardiac in origin, and this can relieve their anxiety. I also refer them to primary care or psychiatry for care, he says. Most importantly, he says, I teach patients how to check their pulse, tell when their pulse is fast, regular, or irregular, to become aware of their heart rhythm. Related, atrial fibrillation patients and doctors have a communication gap. Although Day's arrhythmia clinic does not yet have a formal way of evaluating people for mood disorders, he and his staff help patients to recognize anxiety and depression. They also explain how these might contribute to episodes of atrial fibrillation. In addition to offering professional help for patients suffering from these conditions, I also recommend yoga, says Day. Yoga has been scientifically proven to help reduce atrial fibrillation episodes. For some patients, I have even seen that regular yoga has been able to put their atrial fibrillation into remission. Dangers of underestimating AFib symptoms. Certain other patients in the study, who actually did have continuous atrial fibrillation by the heart monitor, reported having symptoms less than 10% of the time. Researchers reported that those most likely to underestimate their symptoms were patients who had atrial fibrillation long-term, persistent atrial fibrillation, were female, and who were older, on average, aged 72 or older. People with atrial fibrillation who don't feel symptoms are still at risk for stroke and heart failure. We did see that women tend to underestimate the atrial fibrillation they have. We speculate that heart disease in women is not picked up as much because of a bias that people think it doesn't happen to women, says GE. Atrial fibrillation happens in women as much as, or more than, in men. Day says, women often underestimate their symptoms, particularly if they are caring for a sick loved one at home. Too often, they may be so self-sacrificing to take care of a parent, spouse, or child, that they may neglect to care for their own health. Risks of stroke and heart failure persist. Having an atrial fibrillation heart condition increases your risk of a stroke five-fold, and can lead to complications like heart failure, even if you think you are having no symptoms. That's something that's worrisome, GE says. And for people who have atrial fibrillation, he says, up to 1/3 of patients are completely asymptomatic and have the same risk for stroke and heart failure. He adds that treating atrial fibrillation to prevent episodes of a racing heart is especially important for the patients who develop heart failure. This is because, over time, these episodes put an added stress on the heart. The big issue is to prevent stroke, explains GE. And that's not affected by whether or not a patient feels symptoms. When blood clots form in the heart during an irregular heart rhythm, they sometimes travel to the brain causing stroke. We start anticoagulants if the patient is at risk for stroke. Other than that, we are treating for symptom relief.